Welcome back to Live from Paris. It's time now for a look at all today's business stories with Stephen Carroll. And Stephen, François Hollande's in India, his first trip there since becoming president, and he's hoping it'll prove a lucrative one.
That's right. I mean, he's there to do business. That's the point of this trip. India is an important trading partner for France. We know that the exports to India from France are worth more than 3 billion euros. Their imports worth, in fact, even more than that, over 4 billion. 13 billion euros worth of French money invested in India. So a very big area for them to both to spend and to buy from. But a lot of this speculation about this trip has been focused around this deal on the fighter jets, a 9.6 billion euro deal to buy for the Indian Air Force to buy French fighter jets. It's a deal that's been discussed for many months, as our correspondents in India, Constantin Simon and Magdani Gallo, report.
Thousands have come from all over the world to see it.
Up and down, ladies and gentlemen.
A year ago, the Rafale beat all competitors to get to the final stage of negotiations with the Indian Army. The French aircraft manufacturer Dassault would like to conclude the deal this year. So the French delegation is here with a single purpose in mind.
France is supporting the Rafale. The French Air Force uses the Rafale and it's a formidable aircraft. It has proved itself time and again.
When will the negotiations conclude?
The negotiations are going on. They are long, but it's normal.
The negotiations are long because the deal involves important transfers of technology. 108 out of the 126 aircrafts will be constructed in Bangalore, and Dassault has to find an Indian partner for it. This collaboration could last over 40 years.
I am pleased to be here. We are with the Air Force, with 3 Rafale.
Last month, India announced the possibility of extending the contract, information that was confirmed for the first time by the CEO of Dassault.
When clients, even before buying the first batch, want a second batch, it's good. From the moment everything is settled to build more, then we will be okay for the extra batches.
How many extra aircrafts?
As of today, there are talks about 63, but I hope for more.
The final amount of the agreement could go up to 14 billion euros. Dassault hopes this first contract for export of the Rafale will result in other deals. The first target is Brazil, which is likely to respond soon.
Right, well, Stephen, we're going to be moving to here in France next because the latest economic growth figures have just been published.
Yeah, that's right. These are the figures for the last 3 months of 2012. France's economy shrank by 0.3% during that period compared to the previous 3 months where it grew by 0.1%. So it's bad news for France's economy. There have been plenty of warnings that this was coming. Of course, France isn't in recession yet. You need 2 quarters of negative growth to go into recession, but certainly puts more pressure on the government. Let's just have a look at the annual picture as well. As you can see, in 2011, France's economy grew by 1.7%, but this figure now means that France didn't grow at all in 2012. Certainly challenges ahead for France's government. They've admitted that they will now miss their budget deficit targets of 3% for 2013. The government said they're still aiming to reach a 0 budget deficit to GDP percentage by the end of their term in office. But the French Prime Minister Jean-Marc Ayrault has said in the short term that deficit target has to be linked to growth. Siobhan Silk has more.
It was an ambitious target. The French government is now saying it won't get the deficit down to 3% of GDP in 2013. For one reason, growth is weaker than forecast.
It's important to remember where we started. When I was appointed Prime Minister, the deficit was at 5.2%. In 6 months, we brought that deficit down to 4.5%. That's unprecedented, and we're continuing on the right path towards our goal.
That goal is not just to reach the Eurozone deficit target of 3% of GDP, but to completely eliminate that deficit by the end of President François Hollande's first term in 2017. The European Commission has indicated it will tolerate a country surpassing the 3% limit as long as the figure is going in the right direction. The French opposition has little trust in the government's ability to bring it down and is planning to file a motion of no confidence in its economic policy.
What we're worried about is that if we're unable to stick to our targets in 2013, we'll lose the confidence of our investors, creditors and lenders. And if our lending conditions deteriorate, there'll be quite serious consequences for the country.
The Prime Minister won't say exactly how far off the 3% target he expects the deficit to be, but the European Commission and the International Monetary Fund are both predicting 3.5% of GDP at the end of 2013.
Siobhan Silk reporting there. Japan next, Stephen, and their economies aren't looking very healthy either.
No, that's true. Their latest growth figures out today as well. 0.1% of a contraction in the last 3 months of 2012, their third quarter of recession. It had been feared that it would be better than that, rather. So the figures are worse than had been expected. But the overall pictures for 2012 not so bad. 1.9% for the year growth, which is an improvement on 2011. Now that's largely due to a very buoyant kind of first quarter of 2012. Japan's government trying to implement this massive fiscal stimulus plan to kickstart the country's economy. It's had some effect on the currency already. We've seen the value of the yen against the dollar and the euro fall, which makes Japanese exports cheaper. The Japanese central bank has a new inflation target as well of 2%. They had an interest rate decision today, but no change to that and no new policy announcements from them either.
OK, so what about the markets? How were they reacting to all that?
Well, the news from Japan didn't dampen investor confidence, which was, I suppose, good news in some ways. We saw that the Nikkei closed up 0.5%. The Hang Seng in Hong Kong back trading too in the green after 3 days off for the Chinese New Year.
OK, now let's move to the US because there's a pretty big airline deal on the cards there.
Yeah, that's right. This is the merger of American Airlines and US Airways. We're told it's been agreed at board level and that would create the world's biggest airline. Now, the new airline will keep the name of American Airlines, but it'll be headed up by the US Airways CEO Doug Parker. The deal comes after a difficult period for American Airlines. They've been undergoing massive restructuring. They went into bankruptcy protection in November 2011. The new deal still has to be approved, therefore, by their bankruptcy judge. That's why we don't have an official announcement yet. But when agreed, it will have 900 planes, 3,200 daily flights.
Wow, okay.
We'll take a look now at some of the day's other business stories. And the CEO of the French car maker Renault says he's prepared to give up 30% of his performance-related pay once a new restructuring plan is agreed with workers. According to reports in the French financial daily Les Echos, it would be worth around €430,000 to Carlos Ghosn. His 2012 pay packet, the paper says, is worth some €2.23 million. Renault's trying to secure a deal with workers which would include a salary freeze and increased working hours. It's just reported a 15% fall in profits for 2012, but did manage to stay in the black.
Profits at the Eurozone's biggest bank, BNP Paribas, fell by a third in the last 3 months of 2012. The bank reported net income of €514 million for the fourth quarter, much less than had been expected. The fall in profits is being linked to a debt write-down at its Italian operation.
And the National Bank of Greece is to cut some 15% of its workforce. 2,000 employees will be let go as part of the deal to generate savings from its acquisition of its smaller rival, Eurobank. The cuts will target employees that are close to retirement and will be carried out on a voluntary basis.
Now, Stephen, happy Valentine's Day to you.
Happy Valentine's Day.
It is one of the year's most romantic dates today, the 14th of February. And for some retailers, it's also the most profitable date.
Yeah, that's right. In the United States, it's estimated that love-struck spenders will spend more than $18 billion on new goods. That's $130 per person. $1.6 billion on clothing, including lingerie. Very important. And but here in Paris, not so great news. Actually, Valentine's Day, despite being one of the most romantic cities, their tourist figures are always lower in February.
That is surprising. I think it must be something to do with the weather, but never mind. Happy Valentine's Day nonetheless. The international weather coming up next, then Stuart Norval will have all the headlines for you, so do stay tuned to France 24.